morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Connection. We will begin with our prayer of surrender and then on to today's devotion. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me, and the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it, I perceive it, and now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. So today's devotion is called Holding Space. And here is our affirmation. If you'd like to repeat it after me, it's a really short one today. I am a willing space holder. So it says, there will be times when someone you love will need space held for them because they are going through a time of crisis and they don't have their normal capacity for dealing with whatever the situation is. To hold space for someone, I love this, is to learn the song in their heart and sing it to them when they have forgotten it. This doesn't mean singing it for them. Everyone's song is unique to them, but you can sing it to them until they again remember the words. The place of oneness that we all share in our divine Christ consciousness is like the middle of a great wheel. I love this analogy. That's the source where we're all one with our higher selves and with each other. When we incarnate into a physical body, each of us becomes a smaller expression of this, and the image looks like many spokes coming out from the center of the wheel. Our physical existence occurs on the edge of the wheel, at the end of our particular spoke. This far away from the center, it seems as if we are all separate from each other. It is also on the edge where we encounter situations that challenge us, but that also help us grow. When we hold space for someone who is going through a challenge, the song we sing to them is telling them to remember who they are and where they came from. It's easy to feel alone out on the edge. But if they can follow their spoke back to the center of the wheel, they will find the oneness again, oneness with God and with their own divine nature. All right, so our ending prayer is center of being. Help me be a space holder today for someone in need. Amen. All right, many times it happens that our devotion and our teaching will coincide or coordinate with each other. Sometimes intentionally I do that. Sometimes it happens unintentionally. But today is not one of those days. This has nothing to do with what I'm going to teach about. Nevertheless, there was some good, solid information there in the devotion that we should all contemplate this week as food for thought. It's always a good, a positive, and a loving thing to hold space for someone else who is going through a little time of challenge. So before we move on to what we will be talking about today, let's repeat our connection affirmation together. I allow perfect health in my body, perfect peace in my mind, perfect unconditional love in my heart, and the perfect divine timing of spirit to guide my life in thought, word, and deed. Amen. And as we get on further into the teaching today, that whole phrase that we say every week will take on more meaning about our body and what helps to actually create the health of our body. So today I'm going to do something that I don't do very often, but I have done a few times. Usually, as most of you know, I use material from a variety of sources in my teachings, and I try to put them together to form a coherent message on a particular topic, a lot like a research paper. But occasionally I'll come across either a piece of writing or one particular video, as is the case today, a video presentation that's just so well worded and put together that I want to read it to you pretty much in its entirety with very little interruption or interpretation. It includes and touches on several different subjects that I talk about often in my teachings, but it puts them all together in a really beautiful way. So I'm just going to read it to you largely as I heard it, but of course I will add in my own thoughts along the way. So this is not going to be particularly new information for any of you, but it is information that is especially close to my heart because I believe it is really important for and very practical information for our everyday lives. And it's important information that will help us make that mind-body connection that we know exists to be a bigger part of our daily routine by understanding a little better how that works. My brother often makes the statement, we are not our thoughts, and we're not even the thinker of our thoughts. We are the observer or the spirit capable of observing both the thoughts that we think in our mind, that is part of our personality, and we also observe the mind that is thinking them. And that's the part of us, that eternal essence of our higher self that we need to let be in control of everything else. And in this piece I'm going to read to you today, along with my interjected commentary, is going to show us a way that we can achieve that. Not the only way, but a way. So here we go. It begins like this. You are not a victim of your genes. You are actually the master of your biology. For decades, science told us that we are born with a fixed genetic blueprint, and that this blueprint determines everything about us, our health, our personality, our emotional responses, and our potential. We were led to believe that we are bound by the chains of our inheritance, prisoners of a biological fate that we cannot escape. But today, the frontier of science is proving something radically different. A new paradigm is emerging, one that empowers us instead of limiting us. The science of epigenetics reveals that our genes are not static. Rather, they are responsive and dynamic. Most importantly, they are listening to our environment, both our outer world and the inner world we create through our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. All right, so this is my first time out. We've talked a little bit before about this scientific field of study called epigenetics. There's a man named Dr. Bruce Lipton, who I listen to a lot and I have read, who is one of the pioneers of this science of epigenetics. And I've quoted him in some of my past teachings, and he talks about how our mind not only affects, but literally controls our physical health. So back to the video. The word epigenetics means above the genes. It refers to signals that operate on top of the DNA to influence how our genes express themselves. Every cell in your body has the same DNA, but different genes are turned on or off depending on the signals they receive. Okay, so this is saying that just because you have been told by a doctor or your mama that, or your daddy or some aunt that you have a particular gene that runs in your family, that doesn't mean that that gene is automatically just going to express itself. It doesn't have to. Just because mama had breast cancer doesn't mean you're going to. Just because daddy was an alcoholic doesn't mean you're going to be. So, and this whole field of study is showing why that's true. These signals are not random. They are influenced by your perception of reality. That means your thoughts, your emotional states, and even the repetitive stories you tell yourself have a direct impact on how your biology behaves. You are not at the mercy of your DNA. Your consciousness is the programmer. So when you repeatedly dwell in the emotional signatures of stress, fear, anxiety, resentment, and frustration, you create biochemical signals that inform your cells. These emotions flood the body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And over time, the body begins to adapt to that inner environment. It starts turning on genes associated with inflammation, disease, and breakdown. Not because your DNA is broken, but because the inner world you are living in, and I would go so far, I'm going to add this in to say that you are creating, that inner environment you are creating is communicating that survival is more important than growth. That what you need to do is stop growing because all of your energy needs to be put on survival. So we've talked about this before too. Stress keeps us in that fight or flight mode constantly, that feeling of high alert, and that's not healthy. When this is the case, the body believes the environment is threatening and responds accordingly. Okay, makes sense. But just as stress can program your genes for breakdown, elevated emotional states can program them for healing and for balance, which instead of focusing solely on survival, promotes growth. When you start feeling elevated emotions such as gratitude, compassion, love, and joy, you release a different chemistry into your body. These are regenerative signals because they tell the body things like, I am safe, I am whole, I am in alignment. And again, the body responds accordingly. Genes associated with repair, neurogenesis, immune regulation, and longevity then begin to express. This is not philosophy, it is biology. Your thoughts are electric. Okay, that's why they can put, if you've ever seen on television or been a part of any sort of study where they put what they call electrodes on your head or on your chest, it's because, well, how do you think that machine works? Your body is sending electrical signals, or those little electrodes could not pick it up if they were not electric. So it says your thoughts are electric. Your emotions are magnetic. Together, they create an electromagnetic field that broadcasts a signal both inwardly into your own body and outwardly into the quantum field. Every time you think a thought, your brain fires a specific sequence of neurons. The more you think that thought, the more you wire that sequence into your neural architecture. These patterns become familiar and automatic. They become part of your personality, and your personality is intimately connected to your personal reality. Change the pattern, and you change your reality. All right, so let's go back to what I said at the beginning. These patterns are programming your personality, which in essence is your mind. Okay, that's the level where you are the thinker of your thoughts. But your higher self, your observer self, can break those patterns and rewire your brain to literally change your personality, to change your mind. So this is saying there is a level that is higher than your mind. Back to the video. It all begins by becoming aware of those thoughts and emotions that no longer serve you. Your body is not the enemy. Okay, so I've delved into this a lot, studying that. You think that we have these germs or pathogens, whatever, that come and that you feel like your body is betraying you, but your body is not your enemy. Your body is always geared for your survival, and it's just doing what it thinks is the best thing in the moment to help you survive. And that is automatic. But what this is saying is you can change the way you respond to those signals. Your body is not the enemy. It's the reflection of your inner state. Okay, remember we've talked about this before. Sometimes it's not what comes into your body. It's the terrain that it finds when it gets there. Okay, you can have a terrain that either takes it in with fear and says, oh my God, I have this, or this is going to happen. Or you can have a terrain that says, no, my body's stronger than this. I can handle this. I can flush this out. I can do whatever. This is not stronger than what's inside my body because my terrain inside is strong. It's the same thing mentally that it is physically. When you constantly rehearsed past traumas, unresolved emotions, and limiting beliefs, your body memorizes those states as normal. Okay, that becomes your norm. You wake up in the morning and your first thoughts are a record of yesterday. And yesterday's thoughts produce yesterday's emotion. The loop continues. You feel the same, think the same, act the same, and so your body expresses the same genetic programs. This is why people stay sick. This is why they stay stuck. This is why they stay small, because they haven't changed the signal they're sending. But when you interrupt that loop, when you begin to live in the present moment and become conscious of your thoughts, you become the observer. And as the observer, you have the power to choose a new signal. All right, so there it is. Your higher self is that observer. That last little passage sounded a whole lot like what we've heard before from Dr. Joe Dispenza. In fact, this may be directly quoting him. I don't know. There's really nothing new under the sun, right? So we all have access to the same information, and wherever this information came from, it's pretty good. It was just a random video on a YouTube channel I follow called The Interconnected Zone, and the guy, it sucked me in because I'm always a sucker for a British accent, and it was this man speaking in this very deep British accent. So a lot of times I like to just fall asleep to that if I can. So I had it on in the background, and I was like, hey, this is pretty good stuff. I'm going to write some of this down. So he says, you can choose a new inner environment. You can begin to rehearse your future instead of your past. And the moment you do this, your biology begins to shift. Your brain reorganizes, your heart realigns, and your body starts receiving a new message via new signals. Elevated emotions are more than just fleeting feelings. They are powerful biochemical signals that have the capacity to influence your genetic expression at the most fundamental level. This is the essence of epigenetics, your internal environment. The thoughts you think and the emotions you feel send real-time signals to your cells, altering how your genes are expressed. In other words, your emotions are not just reactions to the world around you. They are instructions being delivered directly to your DNA. When a person living in a state of stress, whether it's fear, anger, anxiety, guilt, or resentment, the body shifts into survival mode. In this state, stress hormones, he said this before, it's a little bit of a repetition, like cortisol and adrenaline flood the system. These are the chemicals that are necessary when you need to respond because you're in danger. Okay, but they're not necessary when you're just stressing over something that somebody said 2 days ago to you. Okay, but a problem arises when this survival state becomes chronic. When you wake up every day reliving past trauma, worrying about the future, or dwelling in a mindset of lack and scarcity. Those are the signals that continue to dominate your internal environment. Over time, this influences gene expression. Stress-related genes become activated, and the ones associated with inflammation, immune suppression, aging, and even genetic mutation get switched on. The body adapts to the emotional climate it's being exposed to, and when that climate is constantly signaling danger, the body shifts into protection, shutting down growth, repair, and regeneration. So like I said, when your body is telling you you're constantly in danger, it shuts down every other function. All those necessary function of growth, repair, rest, those all get shut down in favor of right now I got to survive. And again, that works for you if you're running away from a lion, or if you're getting out of the way of a moving car, or if somebody's throwing something at you. But it's not good when you're in that 24/7 over things that in the end don't really matter that much. Okay. However, when you shift out of this state into one of creation, the entire biological landscape begins to change. Again, elevated emotions such as gratitude, joy, inspiration, love, and compassion signal to the body that you are safe. These emotions generate a coherent, harmonious state within the nervous system and the heart. That coherence is not just felt, it's not just like, well, I feel better, it's actually measurable. Remember we talked before about the electrodes, they can measure this. Brainwave patterns begin to organize into more orderly frequencies. Heart rate variability becomes balanced, the body moves into regulation and homeostasis. In that balanced state, the genes responsible for repair, longevity, and regeneration activate. Science has shown that even a few minutes of deeply felt gratitude can downregulate genes that cause and promote inflammation and upregulate genes that enhance immunity. Think about that. The very act of feeling thankful can trigger a cascade of biological changes that support healing. This is not metaphorical. Your genes are literally receiving new instructions through these biological mechanisms. They are being told, it's safe to grow now. It is time to rebuild. One of the most profound discoveries in this field is the realization that we don't have to wait for something external to happen in order to feel these elevated emotions. You don't have to achieve the goal, meet the person, get the job, or heal the illness in order to feel joy, gratitude, or love. In fact, when you feel these emotions before the event has occurred, you are sending a powerful signal to your body and to the quantum field that the event is already unfolding. The body begins to respond to this emotional rehearsal as if the future as if the future is happening now. All right, okay. So there are lots of other ways that we already have this idea, that we express this idea through our vocabulary. So what does the Bible say? When you ask for something, ask believing it is already done. Okay? So that's the same thing. Or we sing, don't wait till the battle's over, shout now. Same idea. Or according to Pastor Lonnie, and so thankful that he introduced this concept to us years ago, get happy first and see what happens. So we know this, we just don't always put it into practice. All right, continuing on. The immune system, when this becomes your internal environment, okay, your terrain, the immune system strengthens. Neural circuits rewire, the endocrine system regulates more effectively. The entire body shifts into alignment with a new elevated frequency. This is where the concept of mind over matter becomes deeply practical. You are not simply thinking positive thoughts or reciting affirmations. You are biologically embodying a new reality. When you do this consistently, when you make elevated emotions and frequency your new baseline, you are teaching your body how to live in the future rather than in the past. All right, time out real quick. I would disagree slightly right here and say you're actually not living in the future, but you're living in the present moment because, as we know, it's sometimes just as easy to fall into the trap of always living for the future as it is to be stuck in the past of, well, I'll be happy when, just like they were saying, but you don't need to already achieve the goal or get the job or meet the person in order to feel that feeling. So don't fall into that trap of saying, I'm only concentrating on the future and not the past. It's just as bad sometimes to concentrate solely on the future as it is. So I would say be more about the present moment. Elevated emotional states make it possible for you to move beyond old genetic patterns of survival. They activate the codes aligned with your future self. In this elevated state, the heart becomes the driver. The heart actually sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. So when the heart is open and coherent, it informs the brain to mirror that coherence. This synchronization creates a powerful internal environment that tells the body to thrive rather than to defend. It creates the biological conditions for transformation. Your cells become more receptive. Your immune system becomes more intelligent. Your brain becomes more creative. You are literally writing a new genetic script in real time through the emotions you choose to feel. All right, I've got to stop right here and say, it said just then, the emotions you choose to feel. So remember what we talked about last week, that you can reach into that void of darkness and pull out anything you want to. You can choose. You don't think so. And maybe you can't choose in the moment something happens how you feel, but once you become aware that that's how you're feeling, you can reach in there and choose something else. So these are things you can program through over time through mental and spiritual discipline. Feelings are the language of the body, and elevated emotions are the vocabulary of a healed, whole, and inspired state of being. When you begin to master your internal world, when you practice the feeling of joy without needing a reason, when you generate love from within instead of waiting for someone to give it to you, when you choose gratitude as your emotional home, you are stepping into a new level of biological autonomy. Your body is no longer a victim of the past. It becomes a reflection of the present, and it also programs the future. You are energetically aligned with the present moment. There it is. He said it there. The body is always listening to the mind. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every belief you hold creates a biochemical footprint that the body receives and responds to. Your thoughts are not just contained in your head. They are electric impulses that send signals throughout your entire neural network. The body becomes the canvas on which the mind paints its stories, and eventually those stories become physical states of being. So remember, it says so what it's saying is your body is just you can't really fool people about what your emotional or mental state is, because your body's going to show it eventually. Over time, you're not just feeling stress, you're becoming it if you don't interrupt that feeling. Once your body is conditioned by a stress pattern, it no longer waits for the conscious mind to command it to kick into stress or survival mode. It begins initiating the signal itself because it has become so accustomed to the feeling. When the body begins running the show, as it were, this is when and how people become addicted to stress, to suffering, to limitation. All right, so I'm going to say this is also when and how people start turning molehills into mountains. You know, there is an appropriate strong reaction to certain things, but when you do it so often, this is what it's saying, your body doesn't even wait for your conscious mind to determine whether this particular situation deserves a big reaction. It just automatically gives a big reaction to every little thing. So you're like, bless my dad's heart, he said he laughs at himself. He is aware of it. He says as he gets older, even small little noises will scare him. And this is something that I'm not sure why it happens, but it happened to his dad. And he used to actually laugh at his daddy because anytime anybody would close a cabinet, Granddaddy would go, oh. And so now my daddy will sit there, and Mom, bless her heart, she's a slammer. She doesn't ever shut anything like this. It's always because she's in a hurry. So now any little sound, he goes, oh, but then he'll laugh at himself. But that's what's happening is your nervous system sometimes just gets so used to responding in a big way that even something small can set off an overreaction. All right. So the body has memorized these chemical states so deeply that it craves the familiar hormones just like a drug addict craves their next hit. The body begins to want the rush of anger and anxiety, the tension of worry. And even if the conscious mind desires the body to change, the body is still conditioned to want to stay the same. All right. So your body, like when you're on a drug, a physical drug, if you're addicted to it, even though your mind says, I need to stop this, your body's still craving that feeling. Well, that's what this is saying. Sometimes you can feed your body so much stress and anger or whatever that even if your mind says, I know I shouldn't want this, but your body wants it because that's what's familiar to it. That's why change feels so hard. Not because it's impossible, but because the body has taken dominance over the mind at a certain point. But the gateway to transformation is awareness. When you become aware that the body is responding to thoughts rooted in the past or to fear of the future, you create a gap, a space of observation. In that space, you are no longer reacting. You are witnessing. And in that witnessing, the conscious mind reclaims its role as the leader. When you change a thought, you interrupt the signal. All right, so what does Dr. Kim Duramo always say? What else is possible here? When you're in a situation that you can't figure out how to get out of, and you just keep turning in a circle and running the spiral down and down and down, she says, say, what else is possible here? Or what is good about this situation that I'm not seeing? If you have a thought you don't like, see if you can change it, or at least shift the way you are looking at or perceiving it. When you observe an emotion without indulging it, okay, you see that emotion is coming towards you, but you don't indulge it, you disrupt the pattern. And when you consistently practice new ways of thinking and feeling, the body begins to recalibrate. It learns to trust and even to crave a new chemistry. The process of meditation is a powerful way to facilitate this shift. So now we're going to talk a little bit about meditation. When you sit in stillness and observe your inner dialogue, you see the patterns that have kept the body enslaved. The goal is not to suppress the body, but to retrain it, to teach it what it feels like to be calm, to be present, to be content. As you consciously bring the body into alignment with the mind, the feedback loop begins to change and a new mental environment is created. The body begins now to memorize states of empowerment and joy, just as it once memorized states of stress and fear. Now, the mind and body are in alignment, operating in harmony rather than in contradiction. This is how healing begins. This is how transformation becomes sustainable, not by force or willpower alone, but by teaching the body to follow a new mind, a mind that is present, a mind that is intentional, a mind that no longer drags the past into the present moment, a mind that signals safety, possibility, and expansion. When a body listens to such a mind, it begins to mirror the energy of that intention. All right, so what does the Bible tell us about? Transforming yourself daily by the renewing of your mind. The body becomes a living reflection of a mind that has chosen to create instead of just survive. Always remember that your environment is more than your outer physical world. It includes your internal state. While most people associate the term environment with external factors like where they live, the people around them, their job, or their current circumstance, the truth is that the most influential environmental factor is the one you carry within. Your inner state, which is a constant flow of information that shapes the way your body functions and how your reality unfolds. Two people can be in the same room, facing the same challenge, and yet their internal environments may look entirely different. One might see opportunity and expansion, while the other sees threat and limitation. The difference is not in the room or in anything about the external physical environment. It's in the perception, because perception is what generates emotional feedback. And that emotional feedback is what creates the chemistry of the inner world, which in turn informs the biology of your body. Focusing on what you lack, what you fear, what you regret, and focusing on what you love, what you're thankful for, what excites and inspires you, send two completely different messages to your body. If your internal world is filled with fear, you will see threats everywhere. You'll interpret neutral situations as hostile, okay? See that what they're saying there? It can be just a neutral situation, but you're going to interpret it. I think I've told you the story before about I was with a certain person one time and at a restaurant, and a stranger came up and had an interaction with us, and when they walked away, I was thinking, oh, how nice. And she had a completely different take on I was like, oh my God, that's what you got from what they said? So the exact same thing can happen. It all depends on how you receive and interpret it. You'll assume the worst and expect the worst and react as if the worst has already happened, because the brain filters reality based on emotional bias, and your outer state reflects what your inner state is broadcasting. But if your internal environment is grounded in trust, presence, and elevated emotion, the exact same outer circumstances can be interpreted as manageable or even transformational. The lens through which you perceive your life is either polished or clouded by the emotional and mental patterns you develop and dwell in. I love that visual image. So what it's saying is the thoughts you allow yourself to think, the way you decide you're going to perceive things, either polishes the lens you're looking through, which makes it clearer, or it clouds it and just puts a lot of junk in there, making you unable to see clearly. If your inner state is one of gratitude, coherence, and purpose, your outer world begins to reorganize itself to match that frequency. People respond to you differently. New and different opportunities begin to arise. Life starts reflecting your inner confidence and order rather than your inner insecurity and chaos. Your outer environment is not separate from you, but rather an extension of your energetic state. Your body, your health, your relationships, your work are all expressions of your internal environment. And that environment is always within your power to transform. Using meditation as a tool to do this is one of the most empowering revelations of the modern mind-body science. For centuries, meditation was understood primarily as a spiritual practice, a way to calm the mind, expand consciousness, and connect to something higher. But today, science is revealing that meditation is also a biological intervention, one capable of altering gene expression and reshaping the entire inner landscape of the body at a cellular level. I talked about this on Sunday, the body does not distinguish between an actual experience and an emotional experience imagined in the mind. Whether you are reacting to a real event or rehearsing it mentally, your body responds with the same chemical signals. This is the fundamental mechanism through which meditation begins to communicate with your genes. All right, so that's why, as we've talked about before, sometimes you can just be remembering something frightening that happened, and what happens? Your heart starts beating faster, your palms start sweating, because your body doesn't know the difference between when it's actually happening and when you're remembering or imagining. But it's saying this same mechanism is why meditation works, okay? Because if that's what your mental state is, then that's the signals your body is receiving, those same chemicals. When you enter a meditative state, you shift from the analytical mind into the intuitive, creative, subconscious parts of the brain. In this state, the body becomes more receptive to new instructions. The thoughts you think and the emotions you feel are also amplified in their biological impact on your body. Meditation can become the interface between your consciousness and your biology. This is epigenetics in motion, and it does not require years of sitting in silence. Even brief sessions of meditation, if practiced consistently with emotional intensity and dedicated intention, begins to signal change. When you make meditation a habit, you begin to build and create for yourself a new identity, not just an unconscious accumulation of past experiences, but in the form of a clear vision of the future you prefer for yourself, or the future you prefer for yourself. Each time you enter a meditative state, you are rehearsing a future version of yourself, mentally, emotionally, and energetically, which causes your body to experience it physically. So just like when you go into fear and you're just thinking about it, your body responds. When you go into this version of how you want to be, your body responds to that too. The more you condition your body within your mind or with your mind to accept this new state as familiar and normal, the more it will crave this new chemistry. All right, so do you see that progression? You're going from your body receiving signals via your emotions from outer external events and then reacting to them unconsciously when you've not been training your mind to shift those bad or negative emotions in any way. You're just reacting and then allowing the mind to dwell on whatever comes up first. All right. So you're shifting from that state where your body has become so accustomed to the stress that it is literally craving it, okay, because your body's goal is homeostasis. So if that's all you fed it and that's all it knows, that's what it likes, okay? If you've only been eating one kind of food your whole life, and that's what you like because you don't know anything different. All right, so, but when you go from that to letting your observer self be the one in control, then you see what's going on around you, okay? You observe the emotions, you pause, you see the signals your body is sending to your mind, and if those signals are negative and stressful, you consciously and intentionally use your mind to change the thoughts or shift the perspective, and then it will send different signals back to the body. You are actually using your mind to train your body, all right? Just like when you go to the gym to train your body, when you're in the gym, you're strengthening your muscles. When you meditate, you're strengthening your nervous system. Years ago, we didn't even know this was possible, but science is now literally proving that it is. All right, so back to the video. One more time. This is the wrap-up. Meditation is not simply relaxation or spiritual practice. It is biological signaling. It is conscious intervention. It is you, and I put in parentheses your higher self, taking command of the most fundamental processes of your body. Through meditation, you are stepping beyond the limitations of your environment, both outer and inner environment. You are entering into a new paradigm where thought and emotion become tools for transformation, where your inner world becomes more real to you than your outer world, where you begin to rewrite your genetic script based on the energy of your conscious creation. Your future self already exists in a new genetic expression. This idea may seem abstract to you at first, but when you look at it through the lens of quantum possibility and biological plasticity, it becomes a profound truth. Your body is not fixed. Your mind is not static. Your identity is not trapped in stone. Every thought you think, emotion you feel, and belief you hold is influencing how your genes express themselves from moment to moment. You are constantly writing and rewriting your biological code through the internal signals you produce. The version of you that is healthy, inspired, peaceful, joyful, loving, abundant, and free is not something you must chase. It already exists in potential form within you, encoded in dormant genetic programs, just waiting to be activated. Okay. Wow. Yeah, turn that switch on. Thank you. So thank you so much for bearing with me as I read most of that, but I don't think I could have said it much better than that. And it kind of did touch on lots of things I have said in the past. So I felt like it was something that was worthy of reading straight through without a lot of interpretation or interjection, even though I gave some. It, like I said, perfectly encapsulated ideas that are really important to me, and that I think are important for our spiritual hygiene. So, we spend a lot of time regularly on our physical hygiene. Every day you do some sort of grooming and bathing and brushing teeth and flossing teeth and painting nails. And, so why do we not feel it's just as important to pay that much attention to our spiritual and mental hygiene? It needs to be kept up and strengthened just as much as our and what's interesting is what we have not understood until recently is doing that actually affects our physical body. So let's not allow these precious bodies that we have been given to care for while we are here on earth having an earthly human experience to become addicted to things like stress and fear and guilt and jealousy and anger and insecurity. We can't always avoid addiction, okay? Maybe you just have that, you're going to be addicted to something, but you can choose what you're going to be addicted to, all right? Because You choose what you put in your body on a consistent basis. If you put enough stuff in your body, physically stuff in your body, you're going to become addicted to that because you get a taste for it. Same thing with your mind. If you could constantly feed it elevated emotions rather than the negative emotions, that's what it's going to begin to crave. So let's consciously use our minds as a tool to retrain our bodies to crave those elevated emotions that this piece talked about: gratitude, joy, peace, and most importantly, love. If we're going to be addicted to anything, let's be, shout out to the 80s music fans, Robert Palmer, let's be addicted to love. Amen? Amen.
Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say amen. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say amen.
Be at peace. I love you. We will see you next week.